Hey everyone, welcome back to Code and Parallel, where we take complex tech concepts and break them down into bite-sized, easy to understand tutorials. Today we're diving into something every modern developer needs to master: how to build a complete CRUD operation using Blazor and NET 8 and clean architecture. In this tutorial, I'm not just going to show you the basic, but we're going to build a scalable, maintainable CRUD application step by step while implementing clean architecture, which is a key design pattern that separates your logic, keeps your code clean, and future-proofs your application. So what are we building? We're going to build a customers application. So as you can see here on the home page, we have a customers page. So what you can do here is add a customer. I can put my name there, Jane Doe, put the email and save. It will bring the customer there. I can add another customer, say Jane Doe. I can add them there. You see, you're able to get the list. I can edit Jane Doe to Jane Doe 2 and save that. I can also delete a customer. So you will see that in just a few clicks, you're able to implement a cloud application using Blazor and clean architecture approach. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's get right into it. So our first order of business is to create a project, set up our solution so that we have adhered to clean architecture. So the first thing you're going to do is open up a Visual Studio 2022, select create new project, and we want to start from scratch. So I will pick a blank solution. I have it here, but you can also search there. So get a blank solution. Next, give it a general name. This is the core banking app, YouTube. Then I'm going to create that. The heart of any clean architecture project, there is what we call the core, and this is made up of the domain and the application layer. They are called the core together. So these are independent of any sort of implementations, database, APIs, whatever. This is just what dictates what your app will do. And you'll see that the domain and the application will just set out the contracts of the things that the application will do. And the other layers will worry about that. So I'll create a folder, add a solution folder, and I'll call this core. You don't have to do this, but I just want to show that this is the core. So just for you to understand. Then I'll add a project, which will be a class library, and I'll call that project domain. So I'll just copy the solution name and put a dot and append domain. So this one, at the bare minimum, it's just going to have entities. So once it's created, I can just delete that. Then I'm going to add a folder, which I'm going to call, I'm going to add a folder. I will call that entities. Okay, entities. And within that, I'll add models that would befit a banking application. So one benefit for you doing this course is you'd also see how we can play around with entity relationships. So one-to-one, one-to-many. We'll try to do one-to-many so as you see. Then we'll leave the rest for entity framework to see how we can do. So I'll add a class. The first one will be called account. Obviously you need to have a bank account. So create a class called account. Once that's created, an account should have an ID that uniquely identifies that. So put prop int ID. An account should have a balance. So prop decimal, call that balance. An account should be tied to a customer. So the customer is yet not created. So customer get and set. Let's create that. Control dot, and you're going to select genotype customer down there. And then also you need to link, if if an account has a customer, then there has to be one thing that links these two tables called a foreign key, because it's a one-to-one, right? So it means I have to create something called a custom ID. The custom ID will be responsible for linking these two, and we'll see how that's best done. An account can have a list of transactions, public list of transaction. Now this transaction is not the one that comes out of the box. Transaction. So transaction, we'll make that nullable because when you create an account, it's not always going to have transactions. So just give the user the option there to have the option not to have those. Okay. So an account of an ID will have balance, customer, and custom ID. Then a customer also. What information could you have in a customer? You might want to have the ID, the name of the customer, the address is called this email, and you might also want to have the phone number, right? Just to know who the customer is. And we'll talk a little bit about validation. So a transaction should have an ID, an amount, a date, a type. Let's not overcomplicate it. I'm going to move amount, date, no need for type. Just trying to keep it simple here. And also an account ID. So there's an idea, a concept of validation, so that when you get to your Blazor app, when you input, if it fails to validate, it should let you know. So I'm going to put what we call data annotations, just to show you how it's done. So you can say this field is required. Without that, don't proceed. This one can also be required. We can fine tune to say this should also be an email address. Again, for the phone number, it is what? It is also required. Okay, right. Required. There you go. Let's push this into their own classes, into their own files, so that we don't violate the single responsibility principle. All right. So your domain is pretty much done at the bare minimum. I'm gonna create the next project, and that will be called the application. And this application will have the use cases of your application. So it will be called banking app.yt. Then I'll call this application. Then I'm gonna create within it. I'm gonna create a folder which we are going to call. Let's call it use cases, but I'll call it interfaces, so that we get to grasp the idea. So I'll add a folder. I'll call this interfaces. Now there are a lot of use cases you can have in your application. For instance, I'll add the first. I would say create an item, and this item will be called an interface. I'll call this an customer repository, like so. And I will make it public, and I'll do it 2 times to also bring the other repositories there. One will be iCustomer, one will be iAccount, and the other will be iTransaction. So what the application will do is it will just say, I expect the following operations on these entities, or else I expect my application to have the following. So for instance, for the customer, we can have, I can say task, then you could say task, add a sync, and you can say customer. Now there's an error there. It's saying we don't know what customer is, because customer is in domain. So you need to add a reference from application to domain. The application is going to depend on the domain, nothing else, right? The domain is independent. So if you do that, you say, okay, fine, give me the entities. So what are we doing in the application? we are setting out what the business logic of our application would be. So whatever logic you do in your application, it should be here in the application. For instance, as far as the customer is concerned, we want to add a customer to our bank application. You might do the same for add an account or make a transaction, and we'll do this as we go along. But you see that here, all it is saying is I want you to have a functionality to add a customer. It does not implement. So the core of our application, these two, do not worry about what sort of database am I going to use. It's clear on that. That will be the functionality of the infrastructure. All right. So we've done this. Again, let's move this into its own classes so that we do not violate anything. And our core is done. Obviously, we'll be adding as we go. Now, I'm going to add another project, which will be called infrastructure. So let's add a class library, and this will be called core banking app, YT.infrastructure. This is where the plumbing is going to happen. So if we want to add a customer to our application, then we need to say, where are we going to store that information? Are we going to store it in a file? Are we storing it in a database? Are we just passing it to another storage API? These are the decisions that are made in the infrastructure. In our case, we want to use a database called SQL Server, right? The SQL Server database, and the ways and means which we save, we're going to use entity framework core. So these are the concerns that will be done here. It means the logic add async in the core will still be the same, but I can change the way I do it in infrastructure. I can change the way I use the database. I could use entity framework core, or I could use Dapper. The domain, the application, the core couldn't care less as long as you do the functionality. So in the infrastructure, I'm going to delete this. And since we're using entity framework, then we need to bring in entity framework to allow us to do that. So you right click on the dependencies, then you're going to select manage NuGet packages, and you're going to bring in entity framework. And the things that are very important in this infrastructure would be, one, the provider, which is the SQL Server. That would be necessary for us to know which database we're talking to, because it could be a NoSQL database, it could be a MongoDB, it could be a Postgres, which would make us use another provider. You want to bring in tools. Tools is going to help you with creating the actual database and making the migration, as we'll see in this video. So once you've added those, Entity Framework has a concept of the context, which is the window for you to talk to your data. So the infrastructure will depend on the application layer, nothing else. Okay, so I'll add the dependency there. Then I'll create a folder which I'll call context. You can have multiple contexts, so it's better to group them so that you can easily maintain them. So I'll create a folder called context. Then within that context, I'll create a class which I'll call banking DBContext. That will be the window to the database, banking DBContext. You are not limited to what you can use on the name of the context as long as it makes sense. So each context, for a context to be a context, it needs to use entity framework because it has that already. So it will be, there's a class called DBContext. So we're going to inherit from that, and this will give us the ability to, you guessed it, use those features. So you bring in a constructor. The constructor takes in a DB context options, which just takes the context. It takes an options, and we're going to pass these options to the base, like so. So pass this to the base options. So now we need to bring in the model. So I'll say prop db set get me an account. I'll call the table account. We can do the same for customer. db set customer. Call the customers. then one more for transactions. Then there's something I just want to show you that you can bring in. As you can see in our entities customer, we had put in what we call data annotations. The other way to do it is flow and validations. And flow and validations is what I'll use to show you how to also bring in entity relationships. So when the context is being called to create the database, you can override a method which allows you to put your configurations. So for instance, you'll see here, okay, let me remove that so that you're clear on how we did that. If you override, there will be a method called on model creating. This is very important. As you're creating the models, there's something I want you to do. So I just want us to play around with the customer to show that a customer can have many accounts. So what you do is you take the model builder, you say customer has many accounts. Now, if we go to the customer class, you will see that it has a list of accounts. So this list here, it knows that that's many. So a customer has many accounts and one customer. And what links these two, the customer and the account, is the customer ID. That's your foreign key, which you will see here we have put it. So this is also another way through which you can make relationships. So moving on, this is how you do one-to-many. Moving on, we've done a database context, but we need to know where the database is. So I'm going to bring in the Blazor application as the fourth application altogether. And this is where, so the Blazor, the MVC, whatever API comes with the database, I mean with the dependency injection container, which just manages what we have as our dependencies. So I'll add a project, and I'll call this project Blazor Web App, right? So look for Blazor Web App, which is here, and then let's create that. I'll call this UI user interface. So next, we'll use the server variant, and interactivity will be done per component, and we'll see as we go. Then we're going to create that. Blazor comes up with the program.cs, so it means it has the DI container, which will manage our dependencies. So this is where we're going to add all the dependencies in our application. And we'll also tell where the database would be. So the first thing is, I want to know where I will put the database, right? So I'm going to add in the app settings of Blazor, there's a configuration called connection string, which comes out of the box. And we're going to use a local instance, which is in Visual Studio. So Visual Studio has a baked-in SQL Server local DB in there. So I'll say local DB, then you say / MySQL local DB. So it knows that this one is the one that is local DB. Then we have what we call a database. I'll call this core bank YouTube YTDB. Then I'll add what we call a trusted connection so that it knows that as long as I'm logged into my PC, it can give you access to that. I'll set that to true. Right. No need to put these ones here. So we're saying in our local instance of the server, which is within Visual Studio, create a database called core and allow me access to go in and do what I want because I'm logged into my PC. We also need to create the actual database, which we have not yet done. Back to our infrastructure, we do have a context. Our context has been done. Our context has been created. We need to point where the database would be. So the first thing would be I'll go to the Blazor, then I'll add the DBContext. But before I do that, remember we said the infrastructure is where you implement these things. Now remember in our application we have things that we have, for instance, we have the iCustomer repository here, right? So we're going to create what we call repositories also in our infrastructure. So I'll create a folder. I'll call the folder repositories, like so. And one of the repository will be I customer repository. So I'll create a class there, and this class will be called customer repository, and this class is going to implement, so let's make it public, and this class is going to implement the I customer repository, and need to say there's an error because we have to implement that functionality. Again, this is the core of our application telling us if you want to implement this, then you need to add a user. For you to talk to the database, we have our database context here, which is the window. But since this is Blazor, I will not use the context right out of the box. I will use what we call a DBContextFactory, because the components in a Blazor, and you see it as we get there, they might have different life cycle. And if we do the scoped with the DB context, it might not perform well. But if we use the DB context factory, this will allow us to create our DB context on demand, and that will suit well with our Blazor use case. So what I'll do is I'll say private lead only. So private lead only, banking, DB context. Then I'll bring in a constructor, and I'll pass in an IDBContextFactory, which takes in the name of the context, where the context now is what? The banking DB context. And I'll call that factory, like so. Then I'll say the context which I have there will just be every single time I call this constructor, create for me a DB context. That way, that one makes more sense. So it means I will not implement this in this video, I'll do it in the next, but I just want to show you that we have implemented this. So now in our dependency injection container, we need to tell it that we have a dependency. So I say builder.services.add DB. That will not do anything because we're trying to bring in entity framework and we don't have it. So for us to be able to add that, we need to add a NuGet package of entity framework, which is called design. Apologies, not that. So let's go there and select NuGet packages, and let's find the design component, entity framework design, which will now enable us to do that. So there's design, install that. Once that's installed, then we should be able to go back there and say, so now we need to add that DB context. So you say builder.services.add DBContextFactory. Okay, I wonder why it is not add DBContextFactory, and it's going to take in the banking DB context. Okay, so one thing I've realized is this one also needs to rely on the application as well as the infrastructure, just for the sake of the DB context. So I will try to bring this in, bring the context. Then remember the context wants to get an option, so we'll give it that option there. So we'll say options is equal to options dot use SQL Server, right? Then we need to give it the place where the location is. So since we have it in our app settings, then we use the configurations, which is built in on the builder. So builder dot configurations dot get connection string. Then we need to give it the name of that. Once we've done that, the name there is default connection, which we're going to put there like so. And once we've done this, we have another dependency, which is we have the I account repository, I customer repository, we have this customer repository. So for that one, we also need to bring in that dependency. So then we'll say also, we also want to get the builder.services.add scoped. So get me the I customer repository as well as the customer repository. Then once we get that, we do this. So just want to run it to see that I have not broken the Blazor application, and it will say a class library cannot be a starter. So go to the Blazor app, right click, make it a starter project, not configure, but rather just right click and say set a starter project, then run it and see if the Blazor is still there. So the Blazor app is okay. All right, fair enough. Let's go and create the database. So we're going to go to tools. You're going to select NuGet Package Manager, then Package Manager Console. And once it loads, you're going to use the keyword add hyphen migration. And we'll say initial DB creation. And it says the target domain doesn't match. So the thing is, we are running in the infrastructure, so you're better off doing that in the infrastructure. These things happen, but it's good to know why that error. So the infrastructure is what has the context. The red there is just to do with the database validation. I mean the decimal validation, so don't worry about that. But we'll see that once we run the migration, it shows you that there's a table customer there. That's the private key, the primary key rather. Then you also see the foreign keys as we had done. So stuff like that. Now for us to create the database, we're going to say update database, which will now go out of its way and create for us a database. You'll see a bunch of SQL commands there showing you that database has been created. Perfect. Now if I go to the SQL Server Object Explorer, which can be found when you click view here, click view, there's that SQL Server Object Explorer there. If I click on it and look at the local DB and go to the app settings, we wanted our DB to be core bank YTDB, and go to databases there, you have your core bank DB there with your subsequent tables. Anyway, thanks a lot for this video. The next video is we're going to work with the front end. Then we're going to see how can we use the front end to save an actual customer. Thank you and see you in the next video. Welcome once again to this video. In this video, we're going to look at the save functionality in Blazor, as well as how it's handled in clean architecture. So we'll focus most of our attention on the Blazor, but just to add the functionality. So we had the interface which had given us a contract which says you need to add a sync, add a customer. Then we said that we need to use this in our infrastructure project. So in our infrastructure project, we had the customer repository and we had not yet implemented it. So for us to implement this, we're going to call the context, because that's what we write, context, and the class is customers, and you want to add in a customer. Then you would want to await. In order for you to affect the changes, then you need to say save changes. So this will enable you to add the customer. Now let's proceed to our Blazor application, and if we run it, there are a few things that you're going to see. So you will see that in out of the box in your Blazor app, you're going to have this outlook, which will change. So this side here, where you have home, count, and weather, this is the nav menu. And this, where there's counter, these are just components. So weather is a component, counter is a component, and I will talk about it better on. But what I'll do is I'll remove the nav menu, or remove the about there. We'll go to our main layout. See that we have components. The nav menu there is a component, which is here. I don't want to have that there, so you can comment that out. And we have that about, which I said I'm going to get rid of as well, so I'll just comment it out. Then we can say, okay, padding top maybe. Let's make that 5. Render the body. So here we are. These are the counters which I showed you. There was the one for counter, weather, and home. I'm just going to remove all of those. I'm going to start from scratch so that you understand how these components are built. So on pages, I'm going to add, click add eraser component, and I'll call this component, it'd be called add new customer, for instance. So we want this component to be able to route to it. So we add what we call a page. So we say page. If you go to add new customer, then on this page, I would like to see. So you see there's a routable component we've added there. I'll just copy this and I'll run it one more time to see if that is working. You see when it runs, it says nothing is found because we've deleted everything. Let's go to the add new counter, and you see we have this. So the nav menu is gone, the about is gone, which is how we want it. Okay, so we're going to create a form that will enable us to create a new user. So I'm going to remove this, and I use something that's a component as well. It's called page title, and in this page title, it's going to be add new customer, like so. Okay. Then for us to add a customer, then we need to have a customer object. It can only be fair. So I'll say private customer. Now I'm bringing the domain entities there. I know people might say, hey, you use your view model, but for simplicity, I'll just bring it there. So we'll say customer, get and set. Get and set. It's a new customer. Since it's the new version of C#, we might as well remove the customer and just put the new there. And we'd like to get the parameters from the form which we're going to create, right? And we need to have a function that will be used to also save the user, which would be add customer. Obviously, we might not need these guys, but we're going to have that function. So whenever we call this function, we'd like to take whatever is in the customer in the form and add it to our database. So we need to come up with our form. So we'll create a div, and this div, the class will be raw. So I'm just using post of 5 there. Class should be raw, and let's try to justify our content to be on the center. All right. Then we're also going to have another div, which just to take half the page, the class would be column 6. Just get half the page. Then we're going to have our form. So there's the HTML form and there's the Blazor form. It's called edit form, like so. There's a feature called enhance, which saves us time because it does not re-render. So I'll set this to true. A very important feature. Set this to true. Enhance should be set to true. Right. A form should have a form name, and we'll call this form name add customer form. Then if the form is valid, then we're going to have onValid submit. OnValid submit, we'll just say call the function which is called add customer. We also want to know, and we also need to know what model we're using. So our model here is obviously the customer. Then we can add a heading to our form. Let's bring an H3, and this will be well, add new customer, like so. Then can bring in a div with a column of div with a class. Let's just put a margin bottom 3. Then we're gonna have a label. The label will be for We have the customer name, and the class will be form label. Form label. Okay, we can close that, and we can call this customer name. Then we're going to bring another Blazor built-in. It's got an input text. It's going to be an input text, can be an input det depending on what you have. So we're going to have an input text like so. And then the text is going to have an ID, and the ID needs to be the same as the label, their name. Then it has what we call an onBind value. So what is it binding to? A bind value. In our case, it will bind to customer dot, you guessed it, name. So ID name, and you can give it a class of form control. There we go. Then I'll copy this div for the name. We have the name, we have the email, so customer email, this would be email address. We have the phone, customer phone. We have to put customer phone or just phone, we'll see. And this will be customer phone number. And then we need to have also another div that will be for the submit button. So a div that will have same class. Okay, we have the same class, margin bottom 3. Then within that we can have a button, and within the button we can have a class. It could be btn, and that btn primary, and maybe just say shadow none. If that looks better, then we can say save. That will save. Then once we get that, remember we have our functionality in the customer repository, right? The iCustomer repository. So we would want to use that dependency, which is the repository, because we don't want to use the actual class. Then it beats the whole purpose of dependency. So I'm going to bring in inject, right? A customer repository, iCustomer repository, called customer repository. It wants us to bring those interfaces. Again, I would like to also move to another page after this. That's where we inject the navigation manager. So navigation manager. Okay. Now to avoid having so many usings, Blazor comes up with the proper way. It's called a class called imports here. So all things will be added. The imports, the using statements will be added there centrally. So let's go to the imports. Okay, for some reason I cannot go to imports. What's the issue? Get me to imports, please. There. Add it here. And if I go back to add new customer, you see the errors will have gone. So there we have it. Okay, sorry, not done yet. We need to say, for us to add, get me the customer repository. Then it has a function in the code, add async, and it adds the customer. Can we await? Because it's an awaitable function. Then after that, I would like to navigate to the home page. But the home page is not yet done. Don't worry about that. So here we are. We have created a form. This form talks to the repository, which is in the application. In turn, it knows how to get the implementation. So I'll copy these guys and also run it. So once we're here, since the home page has nothing, we'll go to the add new component and add new customer. There we have it. Put my name there. Email would be gmail.com, for instance, and I can put my number. Then I can save. Now, we don't have the home page, so when it goes to the home page, it'll give you an error. But we need to find out if we have been able to add. So I'll go to the customers table and I'll go to view data. And we'll see that the email I had put is there. So in this video, we're able to add a customer. In the next video, we're going to be able to view all the customers in this Blazor clean architecture approach. Thank you very much and see you in the next video. So in our last video, we stopped here where we were able to add a customer. And in this video, we want to see how we can view, or rather read, the customers that we have. Now, going into our clean architecture approach, we had the application layer which had an interface or a contract for customers, and we only had one function, which is to add a customer. It means we need to start from here to say, in this call, we expect to read a list of customers. So I'll say task, and I'll make that a list, and we'll say give us a list of customer, and we can call this get or async. The async is critical since it's an asynchronous operation, so it's good for whoever is using the functionality to understand, so that they can await it and handle it better. We have that. Then we need to implement that in our infrastructure, because the infrastructure projects handles the actual implementation. So we'll head over to the infrastructure and then we'll go to the customer repository, and it should complain to say there is one function that you haven't implemented, which is what we expect. So go there, control dot, and you're going to select implement interface. Then for you to get everything, we're going to say var customers is equal to await. So we await it, and you see it brings the async there. Then we're going to say context.customers.to list async, and we just want to return the customers. Again, clean architecture makes it easier for you to handle this. I think there's only each layer has its own concern, which is very good. We'll go to our Blazor application, our presentation layer. We're going to see that we had the add new customer, which has the form. I just want to add at the save there. I also want to add a link to go to the list of customers. So we have the save there. I will bring in an anchor tag, say a href. We just want it to take us to the home page. And since we want it to be a button, we can just get a booster class called btn primarily. And we can say, okay, you might say maybe you don't want to put a shadow there. Say shadow none. And just add some margin there. And we can close this like so. Then this could just be back to customer, back to customers. So this will just be a list that will send you back to the customers. For now, we do not have that customer, that homepage yet. If you noticed in our previous video, when we created a customer, it gave us a 404. Now we need to add the homepage. So the homepage will just show the list of customers. So we'll go to our components. Under pages, we're going to create a customers list. So add a Reusable component. We can call this customers list. So customers list. We want this to be a component that is routable. It means we can route to it. Other components are reusable, like the nav menu we had in our main layout here, this nav menu. You'll see that this is just something that was put here, which we commented out, but that's just a component that you reuse. But if it's routable, if you want to get there, then you have to add the page attribute to say that will be your home page. In our code here, what you want to do, since you want to get the list of customers, then we have to find a way to get the list of customers, and we have already built the functionality in our infrastructure to get all customers. In our code, we're going to create a public list of customer. Call this customers, get set, and just create a new list. Since the .NET 8 C#12 allows you just to do that. You can remove that to make it more readable. Then we want to get this list as soon as we get to this component. And we have a functionality that we call onInitialized async, which means as soon as you get to this // page here, you want something to happen. So we're going to override the onInitialized async. We want to override that. So we'll say, at this juncture, we would like to go to the infrastructure and call this functionality called getOAsync. Okay, but since we don't want to use the concrete class because it will be a dependency, we're going to use the interface, which is the contract. So we need to inject that interface. So inject I customer repository, call it customer repository, like so. So you say, this empty list I have created, I want you to fill it with customer. So I'll say customers is equal to, remember that functionality is async, so you can await and say customer.getOAsync. So this functionality here will get us the customers. So when our page loads, we already have the customers given to us. All we need to do is to put our razor markup, which will help us to get the list. I'll remove this and just make this a page title. Again, this is another Blazor component, page title. We'll call this customer list. All right, I will show in the browser. Okay, this has to go. Then I'll say, give me a div. Let's just make the class there. It should be a class role, and let's justify everything, the content to center. Then underneath that, I would like to, okay, there's a div, okay, sorry. And underneath that, you can say I want another div, and what this div would do, just take half of it. So let's make the column to be 6. Then I would like to have a button that will allow us to add, because when I get to the list of customers, I will need a page. I will need to navigate to another page or to that form which we've done of adding a customer. So I would rather bring it here. So so we're gonna have an A tag there, like so. href, it will take us to that component which was add new customer, and this one we got there by putting what? Add new customer. So you want to go there. All right, then just say take me there, add new customer. And since I want this to be a button, then our the class, I'll call it btn, then btn primary. You can put a shadow 9 if you want to, and also margin bottom 3, so that there is some bottom, there's some space there, and we can say this should be add customer. Nice. Add customer. So when you want to render things for a proper user experience and user interaction to your application, is you need to follow what we call defensive programming. It means you need to search. I mean, you need to check if the customers exist, because there's a possibility there will be no customers, and you don't want to render a UI that does not make any sense. So what we'll do here is we'll bring in our C# code. Say if, right? If this customers we've created is null, okay. So if customers is null, there should be a way we handle this gracefully, right? We can create a div, and in this div, okay, create a div, and within this div, we can say, I'll create a class which is yet to be done. I'll call this class customer item, and we are going to give the markup customer item. Then just tell them that loading customers. Loading customers. Please wait. So we need to handle these things in a way that the user will also not be bored, that they hate our application, because there's no customer. Why should we bother with viewing? Else if we have any user, so we can say customers dot any. If there's any, it means there's something there. We also want to handle it in another way. If we have customers, then since it's a list of customers, we want to loop through it. So we'll say for each var customer, for a single customer in this customers list. Then we can say I want to create a div, right? Just styling, okay? And this div will have the same class customer item, which we have not yet added, but we'll add shortly. It'll be something like that. Then I want it to be a card. So you have an item, then I can add another div and say, give me a div, like that. And this will be another class which I have not added yet as well. I'll call it customer card, like so. And within the customer card, I want to have another div which will have the card body, like so. And there'll be a class there which we're going to call customer card body. It's a bootstrap approach, and within that card I want to have a heading. H5 should do as well, which would be, we want the customer.name, and just under that we can say give me a customer dot the email address. We can put a vertical bar there and say give us a customer dot maybe the phone number, like so. And I think you're done. So it's just something very basic, just a div that has a card, a customer card, an item, and a card body, and this. For now, these three are not yet done. But we could have a customer could be null, you could have a customer, and also we need to handle another option where there could be things could go wrong. So I'll use the same customer item and we'll say no customers found. Okay, beautiful. At this juncture, I would like to run the app and see if it is to our liking. And you will see that when we run it, we have this. I'll add another customer. I'll call this customer. So you see, there's that back to customer. If I click that, it takes me back. I can add a customer. I can have a Jane Doe. Jane Doe at bank. If I save that, the Jane Doe comes. I can also add a John Doe. A John Doe at bank. If I save that, then you will see that we have that, but we want it to look pretty, and that's why we had introduced these classes here. So how do you bring a style sheet? There are two ways. I'll start with the easy way, then I'll show you how to make it more aligned just to a CSS in its own file. But for now, I'll just put it here. There's something interesting. If you go to the hot reload, you see there's file hot load on file save. So I want to do this in real time so that we can all better appreciate what we are doing here. So we'll put this side by side like so. So what will happen is I will put style, which says this is for the CSS. And in our style, the first thing that I want us to play around with is this customer item. So you copy that and you say dot, since it's a class, customer item, then you do this. Okay, let's save that. If you save, it should reload here. So customer item, we'll say, give me a padding. So padding, a padding of, let's try 1.5 rem. And I want you to look at the screen there when I save. If I save, does it change? So that's the padding that I want. Then you might say, I want to have a margin, because padding won't work on inside, and the margin works down there. So you can say just a margin bottom. Maybe give me 1 rem. Okay, let's save that. All right, might not be visible, but you'll see. Then you want a box shadow, which just goes through the card. So we can say box shadow. Now 0.5 rem, and let's give it an RGB color. RGB color. Okay, this has to be 0.5 RGB color. That could be, okay, let's put a basic one, the 0.3. Do that, save that, and you see we have a box shadow there. All right, then we can bring in a border radius just to make it more clear. Border radius, that could be a 0.5 rem. Now I noticed the spacing between the cards is not as you expected. Okay, so let's save that. Okay, and yeah, this was the, so you see that it's beautifully crafted there. You know, not there yet, but at least you can see. And let's look at the border radius. I also need to put in, remove the space there. If I save, should be a change in the radius there. In the corners, it should be more round. And if I add another one, just say test user, t user at bank.com, customer phone. Obviously, we haven't put a lot of validation to it, but you see that now we're able to get here. We're able to go to customer, add a customer. We're able to go back to the list, and this is very, very commendable. Now, you might wonder, what do we mean by Blazor being a component based? I just want to take you to the idea of a component. In our main layout, we had this nav menu, which we removed. You'll see that the nav menu there is not a Blazor functionality or a Blazor component. It's a component we had created. And this nav menu had things that you saw, like home, counter, to the left of the page. So what's the thinking between this component is to create what we call reusable components. Because if we were to use this nav menu, it would have to be on every page. So it wouldn't make sense for us to have every page with this code on every page. It would be too much. It would be difficult to maintain. What if I want to add another nav option? I'd have to go through pages, and imagine if I have hundreds of pages or even 10 pages. I would have to go change in those places. Then that becomes an issue because you have to constantly change that. That's where the idea of a reusable component comes to play. Now, if you look at our customer list here, I can say that this is a card that we might want to show on many places where the customer list is constrained. So it means this could be a candidate for a reusable component. So what I can do is to say, okay, fine. What I can do is to say, let me create a component in Pages. I'll call this, let me create a Reusable component, and I'll call this Reusable component a customer's card. And I don't want to have this. All I'll do is copy what's inside there. I can even cut it and bring it here. Now you get an error. The error would be because the customer name here, it will not know where to get that from. Okay, it's not showing the red squiggly lines, but just take it from me. This is an error. If I build it, it should tell you that's an error. I just wonder why my Visual Studio is taking time to show you that. But you see, it will say customer does not exist in the context. It worked here because we had the customer there, but here there's no customer in our code. So what we do is we are going to bring in what we call a public, not private. It's public because we'll give it to it. Public, it has to be required because if it's not required, then this thing will not work. Then we'll say customer. We'll say customer get and set. All right. Then instead of saying that, we'll bring this customer here, bring it here, bring it there, and bring it there. But it has to be called, it has to be a parameter. Like so. Now if I run it now, I'm expecting to have no error because that has been rectified. Right? You see there's no error. Just not giving us the intelligence that we need. So here, what we'll do is we just like we did with the nav menu there, like we did there, here it will be called a customer card. Customer's card. For some reason it's not showing, and this customer card needs to have a customer. So we're going to say customer card, then we're going to say next it wants to have a customer, okay, which will be equal to this customer we have there. And we do have an error. Okay, it has to be in quotes. Okay, let's remove that. All right, now I'll try to run this, and we are going to see if we are getting what we are supposed to get. And surely when it runs, it gives you the same experience, the same card that we had. So that's how you create a reusable component. In our next video, we're going to see how do we now update this information, change it and edit it. If this video has been of help, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And thank you very much. In the last video, we were able to read, as you see on the screen there. Now we want to proceed to the next order of business, which is to edit the customers. So in our clean architecture approach, the first order of business would be to go to our application in our core and to put the functionality that we need. So we'll go to the interface, iCustomer. But for us to be able to update, we need to be able to get customer and also update. So we'll have two functions that will dictate how this will be done. So the first one would be get me task customer get by ID. It could be now. So let's just also allow that. Then the actual next one would be to actually update the actual customer. So this would be the update operation. These two should be enough. Once you do this, then we have to go to our infrastructure and to implement how we intend to do those things. So go to our infrastructure project and go to the iCustomer repository. And when we're going to implement that interface. For the get by ID, we're going to say var customer. Var customer is equal to, we can await that. say context dot the customers table, then we can say first or default async, and there we'll say you could say c goes to c.id, which is equal to the ID that is coming from the function itself. Then we can return that customer. For the update, we write on the context, and we'll say on the entry, which in this case is customer, you'll say on the customer, if the state has been modified and it is unmodified, then we want you to go ahead and save that. Fair and square. So await context or save changes. So save that. So we are done with our infrastructure. We are done with our application. The next thing is to go to our Blazor application and to bring in these things. So remember, we do have the customer card, this one, which has the name. So I want to add a button that allows us to navigate to edit. So we can create a div and just a class in case we want to style it. We can say the class is options. We can have a menu of options there. We can put edit, add, delete, and even view more. Then we'll say, give me an href, give me an anchor tag. And this anchor tag, I would like it to take me to something interesting. Because we want to edit, then we have to pass also the ID to that component. So we're going to bring in a little bit of string interpolation. So I will say, get me to edit, then there, get me to customer, send the customer.id. And I'd like this to be a class that looks like a button, because it's a button. So btn, you can have btn warning and shadow none. Then we can write there to say edit. Let's see what we have so far. All right, there we have it. But I would like the edit to be somewhere there. And the good thing, we had put that customer card there as the class. So we can just write on that, bring in the style. So there, what I would like to do is make the display to be flex. So display flex. If I save that, does it change anything? Display flex, it comes there. And I would want to have the flex direction itself. So these are just C# classes in case you'd want to explore more. Flex, it should be raw, and we can justify content as space between, and let's see what we get. So it should go to the end. Fair enough. If you click that, it will say 404 not found. Yes, because we haven't done that page. So we're able to navigate to that page. Now we need a component that will enable us to receive things from that page. So I'm going to create a page which will be routable, add a Reusable component, and this will be edit customer. Lo and behold, there we have it. And we'd like it to navigate to this page. So we'll say page, navigate to edit slash, we're expecting an ID which is an integer. And we'll have a page title, and we'll call that edit customer. So this can go. Fine. When we load our page, we want to have the information of the thing we want to edit. So the first thing is we need to capture the parameter that comes with this ID on top there. So we need to have a parameter. This parameter would be a public int ID. So get set. What this will do is it will handle that. And we also need to have, since to edit you need an edit form, we need to also supply parameters from the form. So supply parameter from form. and that would be a public customer, but we don't want it to be a new customer. I'll just make it nullable there, like so. And you will notice that the edit and the add forms are pretty much the same. So what I'll do is I'll just drop that, copy this, and I'm going to say, before we want to edit, we want to see if the customer is not null. So customer is not null. If it is not null, then we'd want to have that form. And in this form, we'll change this to, this could be edit. This would be edit customer. It's okay. Here it will be edit customer. Now we need to have also knowledge of the ID. So I'm going to add a hidden input of type ID, right? Okay, oh no, sorry, of type hidden. Then it will have a name, which is going to be, we just say customer.id. Then it will have a value, which would be, since it's a C# value.id, right? Then we can close it up on this input field. So this would be customer name, so name, email, phone, and back to customers, this could be update. So this form will now give us what we need to do that. But for us to edit, we want to bind these things to that form. So we need to say, when this form loads, so it means we have to override the on initialized async. So we're saying, as soon as we initialize this, we want this customer we've created here, and I'll use a now question operator. It should get you this functionality, which is what? Get by ID. So it means we need to inject in our application, we need to inject the I customer repository, as well as I'll just have to put the navigation manager because we have to navigate. So we'll say, when this happens, then call the customer repository dot get by ID. It gets the ID from our public thing there. But obviously we need to await that since it's async. So we're saying as soon as the page loads, right, run this function. And if customer is null, then give it whatever is here. If the customer is not null, then do not do this again. So this customer is the one that is going to populate there. But we need to have the actual edit customer function. And this will be a private task edit customer and public task edit customer, and this has to be async, like so. So we're saying, okay, apologies. So what error are we getting? Cannot be the same public async task edit customer. Okay. So what's public async edit customer? Okay, I wonder what that could be. Let's just see what issue there is. Should be something. I'll check it later on. I think maybe it could be because of the customer in the mode. But okay, that is it. And then once that happens, we want to do that. And then let's try to run this and see. And if I click edit, then you'll see that if I go back to customers, if I click edit, it's going to bring that. And I can say, let's call edited. And if I update that, you'll see there it comes. If I put John Doe and put John Doe 2, and we are able to edit. So in our last video, we were able to edit, and we came to a point where we realized that the edit form and the add customer form are pretty much the same. And if we are going to do single responsibility, if we're going to have clean code, then we need to reuse this form the same way we did with our CRUD. We saw that the CRUD could be reused, so we had to create its own component. So in this video, we are also going to proceed to create a form component, of which we're going to learn a few things like what an event core is. Then we are going to proceed from there. So we're going to head over to our Visual Studio. I will go. So we'll see that the add form here, this edit form, it's more or less the same. The only difference could be maybe here we're saying save, there we're saying update, and maybe the title. But everything else is more or less the same. So we need to create a form first, a component, which we are going to call this component a customer form. So let's add a Reusable component, and let's call that component customer form. So customer form. So this one is a reusable component. It's not going to be routable. So we might as well get rid of that and not even have the page there. The first thing that we want to know is, since there are two forms, there are two modes. One is a create mode. The other is an edit mode. So we need to have a parameter that will allow us to know what mode we are in. So with a boolean, public bool is edit mode. Okay, it could be edit mode, it could be is create mode. Then we'll say by default it will be in create mode. So we'll set that to false. So that's one parameter that we might need to help us. The second parameter we need is obviously a customer ID, because if we're editing, then we need to know what the customer ID is. So that would be one of the parameters that is needed. As we've done with every other form, we had to supply the parameters. We had to supply the parameters from a form. So we also need to supply the parameter. In this case, that is a customer. The customer there would need to be supplied. The other thing that we've looked at that's similar is the title. So we also need to come up with a title. So we can say private string title. But we want this title to be, if our mode is editing mode, then it must say edit customer. If the mode is add customer, then it must say add new customer. There we go. Then we need also, when we initialize this component, we want to know what mode we are on. So for us to, if we're in edit mode, then we need to use the customer ID to go get from the repository. That means we need to inject the customer repository dependency there. So inject I customer repository called customer repository. Then we're going to override. On initialize the sync. Then we'll say, first of all, when it loads, we want to know the state. So if is edit mode, then in this we're going to say the customer, and remember we used this, we're going to say the customer, we're using that now colons operator. If it's edit mode, then give us who the customer is. If it is not the edit mode, then just give us the customer will just be a new instance of that class. All right, so those are the parameters. Now we need to proceed and get to the markup. How will the markup look? First of all, we want to only do this thing if the customer is not null, right? For the edit one. So what we'll do is we'll say if customer, okay, if customer is not null, if it is not null, then we need a form. And we have the form in the add form here, which is here, this edit form. I can break it down there and just copy it. Copy this and bring it here. All right. Then add customer, it will be add or edit. It will be add or edit customer form. This will be add or edit customer. So the title there will just be this guy here. So that will be our title. That solves a lot of problems, and would want to know if we are in if is edit mode. If it's edit mode, there's something you remember that we need, and that is to have a hidden input field, which we had in the edit customer. That would be very, very critical for this. And the value will be the customer.id, is it? Okay. What else? We have the customer name, email, phone number. Everything else looks okay for me. But when we submit the customer, we need to tell our parent to say this has been done. So we'll come up with another parameter here, and in this parameter, we'll say public. It will be an event callback of customer, and we can call that onValid customer submit, and that will be a get and a set. So if that happens, it will be a get, and it will be a get and a set. Get and set. So when our form wants to submit, we need to have that add or edit customer. So we also need to have that function. You can say private async task add or edit customer. You'd want to invoke await onValid submit, which is this guy dot customer. So there we go. We have the customer ID there. We have everything looking nice and okay. So we've created this reusable component called a customer form. Just like the nav menu, just like the nav card, if I go to the add customer there, I'm going to comment out, or we can even delete everything there and say, when it comes to add, give me the customer form. Give me the customer form, right? The customer form wants to know is editable. Remember, it's a parameter, so now it knows. Are we editing? No, we are not. And it will need to say on valid customer submit, we want you to invoke this add customer. Let's copy that, invoke this add customer, right? So we'll give you we'll call this function. It means we're no longer supplying from this form, and this code can go away. What we'll do here is to bring the customer, which we're sending there, and say customer, which will in turn give it to that guy. So this is done. Then we'll go to the edit. I will also call the edit form there, and we are going to delete that. For here, we're also going to say customer form, close that. Is editable? This is edit, right? Yes, true. It wants the customer ID, which will be, well, you guessed it. It's going to be the ID. Then it also wants to know on valid customer submit. We want to call the edit customer 2. We could remove the 2, but okay, it's fine. So it means we won't need things from the parameter. And since we are sending it, there's no need for us to also wait on initialized. All we can do here is give it the customer and say customer, which we can throw it over there. We don't need to check like so. So let's go to the customer form. We have save there. So let's try to run it and see what we are going to get. So I'm going to click the hot reload. So it's loaded. I'll try to add customer, and we see that it says add customer, but we're seeing private async task add customer. Okay, that should be with our markup. So let's go to the custom form, add. Interesting. Let's just try to add test client tclient@gmail.com 12345. Let's try to save that, and we get that test client there. The only drawback is I think just some markup has remained. If I edit this test client, put test client 10 or 1234 and save, I get test client 1234. So everything is working. The only challenge is this private async task on the add new customer. I wonder where that could be coming from. Let's open the add new customer. Do we have, yeah, apologies, I don't know where that came from. But yeah, if you do that, then we do expect that to be gone, and we can add a customer, and we can go back to, you can add a customer, and we can go back to edit. So we have been able to just create one form that does everything for us. And that's the thing about Blazor being component based. You can always reuse a component. The next video, in the last video, is we want to go back to the customers and see how we can delete an entry. So thank you very much. So this is where we stopped, where we were able to edit a customer. Now we want to head into the delete in our CRUD. That will be the first, that will be the last functionality. So in as much as we use a clean architecture, the first thing we do is to dictate. The core will tell us what sort of content we have. So we'll go to our iCustomer repository, and we're going to bring in a functionality that allows us to delete. You can say by ID async, and this just takes in the int ID. Right. After that, we are going to head to the infrastructure project, customer repository, and it will complain to say we need one, and we'll click control dot. Then we're going to implement that interface. So what we want to do first is to see if a customer exists. So we can say if our customer is equal to await. Lucky enough, we already have this get by ID. So this should be able to give us what we need. Get by ID, and give it the ID there. Then we can check to see if it does exist. So we can say if customer is not equal to null. Let's use English, is not null. Then remove the customer. Then save changes, and that changes. So our infrastructure has given us the functionality. Now what is remaining is for our front-end application, our Blazor application, to enable us to do that. So we want it to be on the card, our custom card. We had the edit here, so we just want to bring the delete also next to it. So I will add a button, and we'll call this delete, and we can give the button a class which will allow us to target that. So it will be a button, and we'll give it an on click. So when we click there, something should happen, and we want to have a dialog. So delete dialog that allows us to delete. We can just add a little bit of the class we want. So we can say make the class btn btn danger. Since we want to delete, it should at least show the people the danger there, and just put the margin to the other button, just put 3 so that it's not that far to each other. All right, so there's an error there because that's not yet done, and we'll get into that. Then we need to have a parameter for the show dialog, so we can create a parameter there and say this parameter would be a private. No, it has to be public, I think. Public boolean show dialog. Show dialog. Like so. So we're getting an error. What's the error? So public boolean show dialog. You have to put get set. We'll see why that could be giving us issues. Okay, then we have to create this delete dialog function. So we can say public void delete dialog. So when we delete the dialog, we want the dialog to show, this one, to be true. And from there, what we need now is to create the actual dialog itself, that when we click, then it pops up. So we'll create a razor component, and we'll call this component, it's a new item, razor component. We'll call this component delete confirm dialog, something that makes sense. So delete confirm dialog. So this will have the logic to say yes or no, yes to confirm, and no to cancel the delete option. So we're going to do that. Then we also need to have another parameter that shows the state. Do you want to show it or not? So we'll say public boolean show. Again, this will be a get, and it will be a set there. Then in our razor layout, we want to say if it is show, meaning show is true, then we want to show the dialog. So we can say, so we'll code it from scratch. So I'll use a div, then we'll have a class. We'll call this class confirm dialog container, and we're gonna start it ourselves. Then we'll have another div, and it will have a class called confirm dialog. Confirm dialog. And within this, when the dialog pops up, we want to ask them a question to say, are you sure? Are you sure, for instance? So they need to know that. Then we can also have another another div down there that has delete and cancel. So we'll have a div there, and we are going to give that div a class, and we want it to spread, so we can deflex it. So there's a class called deflex in CSS. Then we can say the flex should also be flex raw. Then you can also want to justify content at the end of each other, and just add a margin top of 3, and we margin top 3, and within this justify content and all this flex, we're going to have a button. The first button would be cancel, and the second would be delete. So cancel, delete. This would be delete in that dialog that we have. Then we'll give each one of them an on click, and say when we click, we're gonna have an on cancel, like so, and we want to give it a class so that it looks like a button. So btn secondary, and we can put, yeah, that's fine, or maybe shadow none. For this one, it will be an on click, which will have on delete. And the class there, it can be btn and btn warning, because we want them to know that they will be ahead. They will go ahead and delete. And we can put the margin to the side, just put it at maybe 3, like so. So from this point, we want to have these functionalities, the on cancel and the on delete. We are going to use what we call the event, and we've used it in other videos. So it's a parameter. We're going to have a public event call, and you see how the event call works. This will be on console, event callback on console, get and set it. And we can copy that and also have the one for on delete. So when we click on delete, we're going to call this callback, and you see how when we call this component, we are going to give it what it needs. Fair enough. So you might see that I have brought these things here. I would want to style them so that it looks like a pop-up. So style, I'll start with that one. And some of these things might be archaic. I mean, they might be alien to you. Don't worry, it's just CSS styling. What matters is actually understanding how these things go together. So we can say in the confirm dialog, you can say play around with the position. You can make that absolute. After position, you can say top is 0. You can have left. You can have right. So left, right, 0 again, and you can have bottom, 0 again. Then we're gonna have the minimum height, so it's got mean height. We can give that 100 view height. Okay, so mean height 100 VH. Then we can have the display. We want it to be flex. Then the flex direction itself, you want that to be in a sort of a column. Then you want to have the background color. Then that would be RGB. That's fine. The black is okay. And we're gonna have a Z index. Make that 2000. 2000. And we will see this in action, how it is going to be displayed. The other thing we'd want to also play around with is the dialog itself, the confirm dialog. We want the display to be flex. The flex direction should be column. And how you justify the content, background is white. And how you justify the content, you want it to be space between. Then from there, we would also want to have the mean width. We can set that to 20 rem. Oh, okay, 20 rem. Come on, 20 rem. And then we can have the padding. Give that 2 rems. We can have the border radius. We can give that 1 rem should be enough. Background color should be white. And okay, border radius 1 rem. 1 rem. Come on, 1 rem. I should have the 1 rem. Then also want to have a margin top so that it does not host to the top. Now you can give that a 1 rem. And position, it has to be fixed, obviously. So position, make it fixed. Not figure, fixed. Okay. So what we've done there is just to sort of set up our component. So we wanted the dialog to have 2 things, to have the heading, are you sure, cancel delete. When we click cancel, we want to call this event callback. When we call delete, this is the callback. This is how we want it to look. That's the bare minimum. So we need to put it somewhere. So it's going to be hidden. Then when we want to delete, it has to be shown. So it means where it can be put to make sense, then it has to be in the custom card, this card that we have here. That's where it can be, because on that individual card. So remember, the name of this thing is the delete confirm dialog. So it's a delete confirm dialog, right? Then remember, it has the show on, cancel on, delete. So when we want to show, we have this show dialog here, right? When we want to cancel, we will have a function. So we can say this can be cancel delete, then that can be delete customer. Okay, so we're saying on our card, which shows the customer details, we're going to have something hidden there, which by default is false, right? Obviously, if you don't set it, it's false. And when you click delete, you want to show it. So you see that on show dialog here, it will take whatever the case is here. If you click delete dialog, this function, it says it to true. It means this, what will go there will be true. On cancel, you want to have a function that will do here. All we did in the dialog is just to define event callbacks. But when we call this callback, they have to call another function, and that function would be cancel and delete, and then we're going to have those functions down here. So we're going to have one public void cancel delete, which is this one. All we want to do is just hide it, since you don't want to do that anything. The next one is, if you do the actual delete, then we want to do the actual delete, which is called delete customer here. Now for us to delete, remember, we have the repository, and in the repository we have the delete by ID async. So we need to inject, okay, it's already injected there, but we need to call this function, which is called delete by ID async. So we'll do that and we'll bring it here. So it will be delete by ID async. But we want to also set the show dialog to false, because at this time when we click delete, we are confirming we want it to hide. And when it hides, we want that to navigate to the home page. So for this dialog to work, we need to have what we call a render mode to be interactive. When we were beginning with the application, we chose server, so it is static. So for us to bring in that rendering, we'll go to the card list, then you add what we call a render mode. So render mode, then you can say server render mode, server interactive server rather. So that will help you to do that. So let's test it and see how far we've gone. All right, so we'll try to add a customer. This will be called to delete test delete at bank.com, and we give a phone number there, and we're going to say save. So there we have it. And when I click delete, you expect it to pop up, but for some reason it's popping at the side. We can fix that, but what we'll do now is to confirm the delete and see what happens. And once that loads, you will see that we're able to delete. Just a quick look at that issue on the confirm delete. We must have missed something, position. So the challenge is with the flex. Let's see. It's absolute. The top is 0, the right is 0, the bottom is 0. We have the mean height, display flex column. I was supposed to align those items to the center as well. So we're supposed to align items on the center, like so. So let's click it one more time and look at it. We're gonna wait for a tick there to show that it has done the hot reload. Okay, so we'll try to add test delete, test user 6, save that, then delete. There it is. It's supposed to be red, but it's fine. And if I click delete, then that one must be gone, and you'll see that it is gone. So in this tutorial, we've been able to just look at the CRUD, look how you bring in clean architecture, and then see how you can bring it all together. So this should catapult you to pretty much every other problem that you've seen. And the next video from here would be how do we bring in things like authentication, but that will be another series. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being with me this far.